We are now moving into our penultimate session of the day, and I'm super delighted to welcome three fantastic speakers to the stage, our virtual stage here today. Joe Mandese from MediaPost, Katrina Cukaj from WarnerMedia, and Kelly Metz, Omnicom Media Group. And the three of them are going to have a fascinating discussion about the transition to a multi-currency market and how we make this really work in practice. So, Joe, Kelly, and Katrina, take it away.
Well, thank you, John. I'm very excited to be here today to moderate this closing discussion for CIMM's conference and summit. We have Katrina Cukaj and Kelly Metz. So I'd like them to just do a brief introduction of themselves and explain why we're speaking about this topic. Katrina, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me. Hi, Kelly. My name's Katrina Cukaj. I run sales. I'm the EVP of Sales and Client Partnerships for WarnerMedia. Been at the company for going on 22 years now. A wonderful company that I work for all these years. And I have the privilege of managing an incredible sales team that is in market and, taking the opportunity to talk about, all things WarnerMedia. And work a lot with our friend Kelly Metz here. She's spent a lot of time with us lately, and looking forward to this discussion.
Kelly?
I am Kelly Metz, Managing Director of Advanced Television and Linear Television Activation. Quite a title, but that just simply means for Omnicom Media Group, I work at the Center of Excellence and focus on one of the best topics, currency, in this day and age, because we all know it's changing and it's inevitable. So how are we all tackling it? So I'm thrilled to be here and I'm excited to answer some of these questions.
Well, thank you, ladies. So I'm excited. I've been covering this marketplace a long time, and I think we're really reaching an inflection point this year, but I'd like to get your point of view on it. So the agenda here is whether the industry will continue with a single currency, if in fact we had one that was singular, or whether we're moving to multiple currencies. What I'd like to do to start off is just define what we're talking about here. When we use the word currency in the context of this debate or discussion, what are we really talking about? And I'd like both your points of view on that.
I will defer to Katrina to go first.
Well, I think the way that I define a currency is two partners getting together and deciding on what is the best way to transact and measure on behalf of the value of both sides of the house, but it is a mutual and inclusive direction in terms of how we transact together. And, obviously working both parties being in the right and both parties agreeing to that form of currency or that transaction vehicle.
So I share that opinion that it is a mutually agreed upon metric between the buyer and the seller in the media space, but I'm going to add another component to this, which is preferably a currency is a metric agreed upon and validated by a third party, neutral third party.
Well, that's great. So I think that's a great starting point, because the business I've covered, television, for the last 40 years, has utilized a single currency for the negotiation and the guarantees and the post-value measurement, which has been these Nielsen GRPs. And they have been, up until this past year, measured and accredited by a third party. But I'd say we're going into kind of a perfect storm here into this year's upfront, because you have the, quote, standard currencies not even accredited. You have all these alternative currencies coming into the market. So I think it'd be good if we just got into it and said, like, how is this going to impact the actual negotiations in the marketplace? If we don't have a standard accredited currency, and we have all these alternatives coming on stream, how are you going to figure out how to do business?
I don't think it's that complicated, honestly, because as you know, and you mentioned, it's not as though we didn't have multiple currencies. We did. We were transacting on impressions, primarily in the digital ecosystem, and transacting on GRPs for Nielsen in the linear space. So I do think that because this is a mutually agreed upon metric by both parties, it's not as difficult as you would think it would be. And there are companies out there enabling this already in the space. And what the opportunity is for industry is finally to transact on metrics that are more meaningful to advertisers. And in our case, we're really focused and excited on the advanced audience component of this, because we've been talking about it forever with data-driven linear and with addressable. But with new currencies, we can finally crest the third-party verification aspect of, I bought this audience from WarnerMedia, and now it is being validated and measured by a third party. And the reason why that's so important, and quite frankly, why it's not Nielsen, is because their panel is, quite frankly, not representative enough to capture all the on-demand components that are going to be needed for next generation currencies. And Nielsen knows this, which is why they're introducing Nielsen One. So when you look at what we're engaging in, is we're really looking at cross-platform opportunities to guarantee. And most of our media partners, WarnerMedia absolutely being one of them, are embracing that because they have such significant streaming viewership at this stage. The consumers have been ahead of Nielsen and have been ahead of how we've been guaranteeing in the upfronts. And I think 22-23 is where we catapult ourselves into this world and finally guarantee on metrics that are more relevant to how consumers are viewing television.
Yeah, Joe, I agree with Kelly. I mean, we are working hard in the market together. We've spent a lot of time these last probably quarter and a half meeting with everybody that we possibly can to understand what does somebody like a Kelly need from us, and getting that different perspectives from the various organizations that we work with and clients specifically. So, we are well underway for testing and learning on multiple currencies with different organizations that we've tapped into, and it will be an important part of upfront conversations this year. Who knows how that ends out, but I think as an industry, we are ready to go, and I applaud the client side of the house, but I also applaud my competitors on the supply side, which is moving pretty aggressively and forward to understand what could we do better and truly learn. And listen, having a standard and having something like the MRC or whoever, be that neutral party is important, and it is a wonderful thing. That has changed as well, and that can't stop us moving forward, but it is important, and we recognize it. But we got to keep this train on the track of moving forward and understanding for me and my side of the house is, what is the full value of every platform and every consumer that we have, the full value of it, because I would say I don't think we've necessarily measured the full value of every platform and every eyeball across the various media that we have.
Okay, so if I heard you both correctly, it sounds to me like the legacy currency is done. We're moved on from that for this year's marketplace. Nielsen One may or may not be in play for that. I know they're in alpha mode with some agencies. I don't know if Omnicom's one of them. But do you think there'll be a factor with the new platform as one of those multiple currencies in this year's market?
Inevitably, I think they will. And I do think that the Nielsen GRP is alive and well for 22-23. There will be plenty of dollars booked against a Nielsen GRP. I think the nuance with Nielsen One, and again, we appreciate what Nielsen is doing with Nielsen One. They're taking the right steps. They're moving to larger data sets. They're making the right decisions. They just have made them, a little slower than consumers have made those decisions, right? So that's kind of the nuance with Nielsen and the current Nielsen, panel versus what Nielsen One will be. But I think from our perspective, we are open to transacting on, again, multiple currencies, and I don't think that's going to change. I think going further and further out, you're looking at that being a consistent trend, is that we are transacting on multiple currencies across multiple partners. I don't see that really going away, just because of the reality that impressions have always existed. We've always been transacting on impressions, in other markets, and that is a reality. And so I think practically speaking, we're there. We're going to be transacting on multiple currencies in 22, 23, and well beyond that. And that's great news for not only the supply side, but for us and our advertisers, because now we can really focus on eliminating the waste, getting more efficient, focusing on challenges that have plagued the television industry for years, like frequency. We can maybe build some solutions together, particularly around a guarantee that help us manage that and make the consumer experience more valuable.
So it sounds like we do have a currency, a standard common denominator. It's the impression. The issue is that we have multiple suppliers of that impressions estimates, right? So you have the legacy company, Nielsen, moving to a new platform, and you have a whole litany of new suppliers. Some have been around for a while, but they're just getting, how should I say it, certified. So Katrina referred to one of her competitors, some of her competitors being very, aggressive or assertive in this area. I think the notable one has been NBC Universal, because they've come out and pushed for it. And they've developed a framework, and they've begun certifying suppliers. So the question I have for both of you on the buy and the sell side is that the way the industry should be agreeing on new currencies, to have a supply side company certifying? I mean, I know that's the way it's done in digital, obviously with Facebook and Google and others, but that's the way that business grew up. Is that the right way for the industry to be moving it? Or should we be looking at something else, more of a cross-industry approach, something like we do in other countries with JICs, joint industry committees, setting parameters and awarding contracts that are stated by the industry, not by one side?
Well, I'll start. Joe, we've all tried. I think the three of us here have been on various different, panels and consortiums and groups with all of the best intentions to get there and do it. And that should continue. That should absolutely continue. I think that we just have to move a lot more aggressively. And if we're waiting for all of us to get in a room and figure it out collectively, I don't think it's going to happen. So, whoever's leading the charge and pushing things forward, either all the various different individual companies, but the relationship that we have with Kelly is really more important to me. Kelly and her counterparts at her competitors is more important to me in terms of how we move the industry forward together than yet another consortium of groups and I've been in all of them, where we just have not been able to get it done together. So maybe there's hope to continue to do it. And I raise my hand for all of them, but I don't think we've been successful. And I think we're at truly the word that you used, a tipping point, where client side, supply side is ready to go together and really just roll up their sleeves, get in the weeds together with multiple organizations to figure out what is the best way forward. And we're going to learn that some things are not going to work. So, and hopefully that some things are.
I mean, I echo that sentiment, because I think the practical reality is consortiums are great. And I do look forward to a cross-industry standardization process, but you don't get to standards without testing. And the fastest way forward is to test with their partners, not a consortium. Consortiums and building consensus will happen over time, but in the near term, it's going to be Omnicom Media Group working with WarnerMedia, working with the NBCUs, working with Viacom, CBS, et cetera, and working with Disney to really make sure that we are mutually agreeing on transaction metrics and are comfortable with that third-party measurement provider. And that's just very practical and pragmatic. And the market will decide who the winners and losers are over time. I have every confidence in that. And I think that's really the practical path forward.
So let's nail that down. So we're referring to it now as testing, development, experimentation. NBCU has said they're certified partner that's delivering Olympic ratings. Now I get a release every day from NBCU on the Olympics from iSpot, and they're calling that a test. So are we entering a season now of negotiation where these will be like learning processes, or are you actually going to be guaranteeing and posting and measuring your deliverables based on those numbers?
We have an objective to guarantee in 22-23. So that is our objective. Whether we will get there is subject to the testing and learning. So I think practically speaking, if I were to look in my, crystal ball, I would say, yes, there will be guarantees on an alternate currency in 22-23 somewhere, somehow. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But practically speaking, it may not work with every single one of these alternate currency providers. We're going to look at these numbers, and some of them will be wildly off, and we will have concerns, and we will not move forward in booking against that. But then there will be partners where Katrina and I can sit down, we can look at the numbers together and say, okay, this makes sense. Let's do this.
So at least some part, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Joe. I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, we are in market right now, and have been since the fourth quarter, and preparing ourselves to understand that data that's coming back, and the relationship between us, the value of our customer, and our clients. So we are, I agree with Kelly. We're going forward, and unless you put skin in the game, it's never going to get done. So let's put some skin in the game and do it. Now, would it encompass the entire market? Probably not. But we have intentions to go in and move forward together.
So I think we've answered the first part of the panel's thesis, which is, singular or multiple. It's clearly multiple. The question is how much of it will be multiple. Do you guys have any sense for back of the envelope, how it's going to play out? Will a quarter, a half more of the business be done on the basis of these new currencies, or will we, for the most part, default back to GRPs?
I do not have enough data right now to make a call, honestly. I mean, I'm still getting the numbers in, and we're still, some of the cross-platform aspects of this, the campaigns for the tests haven't even launched yet. So I don't think the data's in yet to say, hey, it's going to be this amount of money, but I think it's going to be significant enough that that we'll grow from there. I mean, I don't think it's going to be an insignificant volume by media partner, because they all have perspectives on the alternate currencies, and they all want to move down that path. And I think practically speaking, that means we will be guaranteeing multiple campaigns across some of our top tier advertisers on an alternate in 22-23.
Yeah, I can't make a call there yet, Joe, either. To Kelly's point, we're still looking at all the data, but I can tell you adoption in the market has been more aggressive than ever before, even with last year's upfront. We've been in the audience targeting business for a long time, and I'd say the first many years, it was a bit of a bumpy road for, the supply side and our agencies to work really closely with our clients to convince them to think about audience targeting. But adoption in all these areas is more fierce than I've ever seen it before. And, I can't put a number on it yet, but it will be a decent amount.
So I'm feeling like a real air of pragmatism going into this year's market. So historically, if Nielsen introduced a new methodology, whether it's people meters or broadband only households or whatever it is, there'd be a year-over-year comparison of data before the market utilized it as currency. We're not talking about that here. We're talking about an on-the-fly, building the airplane while it flies kind of marketplace. Is that what we're talking about here?
Practically, yes, because Nielsen cannot accommodate the change in consumer viewership, practically speaking. So in order to account for that viewership, in order to reach the eyeballs that I need to reach for my advertisers, I have to transact in a different way. That's just reality. So given that we have to face reality, it makes sense that we would look to alternates in a fast and furious market, because we need to guarantee those eyeballs. I need to understand to some degree what I am getting when I'm buying a streaming package from my partners. And to revert back to an age gender panel in a streaming environment just seems very retrograde and not something that moves our industry forward. So that's that's where our thinking is very much, is on behalf of advertiser and buyers everywhere. We need to move TV forward in this way. And practically this is the first step, is the 22-23 upfront on pragmatic guarantees on alternate currencies that can accommodate that cross-platform view. That's really what we need to do.
And I would add, on our side, we are leaning, very aggressively into national addressable. I'm not going to do a year-over-year comparison on a national addressable business that is going to lend a lot more value. And I think sometimes those year-over-year comparisons slow us down and stop us. So again, it's, different forms of business coming forward, different platforms, different products. And I don't think a year-over-year comparison is always the right comparison.
Okay. So your day jobs are more negotiating deals and packages and structuring, the money and the value of it. You're not normally doing methodological research on the fly. Let me ask you, will that be a part of what you're negotiating this year? And how will that work out? Will you be haggling over who the currency is, what the latitude of their measurements are? Will you be getting into things like, normal upfront deals have built-in terms and conditions like cancellation options and guarantees and things like that. Will there be terms associated with the currencies you use?
Practically, there have to be. We have to agree on an error rate. We have to agree on when make goods happen on the new currency. We have to agree on all of that when we sign these deals. So that's definitely going to happen. There are inevitable clauses in these deals, but yeah, I don't see that as a hurdle. Again, the entire industry has presumed that Nielsen has been accurate. Well, we know it's not. So the idea that this change is scary. It's scary for those who don't understand that linear hasn't been the linear television since the pandemic started. It's not the linear television of the past. Streaming has just skyrocketed in terms of viewership and hours spent. So we really need to embrace the alternative measurement partners here, because again, it's the cross-platform piece that's going to make the difference for my advertisers who are really trying to reach particularly the consumers that are very hard to find in linear television these days, but are everywhere in streaming. So these are the types of things that we're trying to accomplish with all of this happening. And it's going to be a wild ride, but we are up for the task because we have to be.
We're going to negotiate, Joe, and we're going to haggle as we always do. I have a smart group of clients that I work with. They don't let me get away with much. But I think the difference this time around is there's going to be a little bit of grace that we're going to have to give each other in terms of, and we've all talked about this in the industry, not having everything be so perfect. Because again, that is another thing that slows us down. But yes, we are absolutely going to negotiate and haggle and hopefully not box ourselves into too many guardrails where we just don't move forward.
So instead of eating cold pizza at 2 a.m, you'll be eating it at 3 a.m. this year. So I don't envy you. Can we talk a little bit about how you're going to suss your supply chain? So NBCU, I hate to keep harkening back to them, but they've been very transparent about their process. They've identified a framework with an interesting power grid of where they rank on it, including Nielsen and others. How are you picking and choosing between you and Omnicom, say, and vice versa, which alternative currencies you're going to use? How do you decide that?
So we went through a process last year with various different organizations, a bit of an audit vetting process. But what we did as we were doing that, we were having a little bit of a listening tour with each of our partners, Kelly happening to be one of them. I am not in the mindset of building and doing things in a vacuum, in a corner, without listening to what my clients are dealing with, what our agencies are challenged with their client base. So we went on a very aggressive listening tour, and to be honest with you, heard different things from different agencies and clients, and have taken all of that in. But from that point on, we made some decisions with the companies that we're going to work with on the WarnerMedia side. And those three companies that we're testing and learning with right now, Joe, you probably know, are iSpot, Video Amp, and ComScore. That's not to say that companies like 605 aren't in the mix as well, but those are the three companies that we've kind of put our stake in the ground to do a lot more testing and learning. And that came from, you know, spending a lot of time with clients and listening to what their needs are and where their heads were at with those organizations. So that's how we got to where we got to.
And if an agency comes to you with a different supplier, at least if it's in your wheelhouse, will you consider it?
Yes, we would consider it.
All right. I mean, one of the frustrating things for me, being a journalist who covers the industry, is, for better or worse, the common currency was transparent. Everybody knew what it was. I mean, every newspaper in the country would report on Nielsen ratings the next day. As part of that, we also had an industry standard that was self-regulated. And one of my questions for you is, are we moving into a world of more opacity where outsiders don't understand what you're delivering as a video supplier? And, you know, whether that might beget government oversight again. I mean, we're operating under a consent decree for the last half century based on self-regulation through a third party, the Media Rating Council, vetting and accrediting the supply chain. Are you guys worried about that?
I personally do not lose any sleep over that. Why? Because you're going to see consensus build through the market as to who the providers will be in this space, and those providers will submit all of their methodologies and all of their metrics for accreditation. That is part of this process. It's just practically not going to be there for 22, 23. So I think self-regulation still works. I think the transparency will be there. I think that there is an introduction of complexity here, obviously, because there's no single source of truth. But I actually think that that's positive, because that will open up, and the new currencies will open up, quite frankly, a freer world of content creation. You won't be dependent on these Nielsen overnights that really killed shows before they even got off the ground. And now with streaming platforms and library content, it should have no bearing on whether a production company chooses to go forward. So I really see this as, not only did these currencies move us forward in the context of, now I can understand the eyeballs across this video on demand universe, but it's going to move the content creators forward in understanding the value of library content and when they should be making investments in shows, because they won't be dependent on these overnights that are completely irrelevant to the streaming world. So I think that this is a whole new world for us that we need to embrace wholeheartedly, because it just means more content, more audience targeting, more audience delivery, and that will be transparent. It will be more complex to understand because there will be multiple options out there. But I think that's practically where we end up.
Okay, so I guess just as a last question, if we have time for it, is how do you see this playing out over time? I mean, will this be the permanent state of being, constant research, development, experimentation of new suppliers of currency metrics, or will a standard emerge over time? And is that what you're hoping for, or are we into a prolonged process of creativity and innovation?
I think it's a little bit of both. And I think Kelly had addressed it in her previous answer to a certain point. There's going to be a lot of creativity and innovation, Joe, and we're going to try different things. I hope at one point that the industry bands together and the market will decide what that standard is, or multiple ways of doing things. So I think we're at a time of that innovation, and we will play this out and see where we net up. And but I think Kelly pretty much said it. the market, and what the market bears and what we learn will determine, what those potential standards could be or not.
So I guess last question is, given what we discussed today, what do you think we'll be talking about a year from now when we get together and do a panel at the 12th annual CIMM Converged TV Measurement and Data Summit? Will we still be talking about this? Will we move on to something new?
We'll definitely be talking about this. We may be talking about some winners and some losers at that point, but we'll definitely be talking about this.
Well, I hope to report on them too. So thank you for your time today. I learned some things. I hope the audience did.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Right. Well, Joe, Katrina, and Kelly, thank you for that fascinating session. I think we'll be talking about that topic, the transition to this multi-currency market, a lot during the next few months, and certainly at next year's CIMM Summit.